In this video, I interview choreographer Barry Lather. We discuss everything, from dancing with Michael Jackson on Captain EO, winning the MTV Video Music Award for Best Choreography for Janet Jackson's The Pleasure Principle, choreographing Michael on the Jam and Ghost short films, and being tasked to completely rework the Thriller choreography for the cancelled 1995 HBO One Night Only special. Stay tuned for lots of exciting new details here on Red Jackson Dance.
I choreographed a whole new Thriller in this futuristic industrial punk vibe. And I also remember him saying, he goes, so long as it's better than the original. And I was just like, oh my God. I was saying something and then Michael overheard. He goes, you're getting ready to have a baby? And I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, that's a dream of mine. And that's when Michael, he literally collapsed and hit the floor, and paramedics came and they took him off to the hospital. I'm like, I saw it happen. I was like, oh my God.
Your first project with Michael Jackson was Captain EO.
Correct.
So at what stage in your career did this opportunity arise, and what was it like working on such a big budget production with George Lucas involved and Francis Ford Coppola directing?
Correct.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I moved to LA in '84 right out of high school. So I didn't go to college,
Wow.
but I had a scholarship at a big dance studio there.
Yeah.
So I was training, and then after about 6 months, I started going to auditions. And this was about 10 months after I was in LA. I got the job. It was a humongous audition, 1,500 people. It was massive.
Wow.
It was in the same room, too. The studio was in the same room where the audition for Captain EO was in the same room where he created Thriller at Debbie Reynolds' studio in Hollywood. Yes. Yeah. So, huge audition. I got the job. I couldn't believe it. I was 18 and a half years old, getting ready to turn 19. And I mean, everybody in the world then wanted to work with Michael because it was his first project after Thriller. So it was massive, and everybody knew it was going to be massive. And it was, this hearing of this 3D technology and George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and Disney. And so I just was thrilled to to have gotten a job. I had a great audition. I felt good, but I'm pretty young, I don't know if these veteran dancers in LA, I don't know what kind of chance I have, but when I got the call, I couldn't believe it. I was just in awe.
Absolutely. Yeah. How many of you were chosen out of that 1,500?
40. There was 40 out of 1,500 people.
Wow.
Okay. And me and this other young dancer, friend of mine, Marlene, we were like the two babies, we were like the two 18-year-olds that got the job. So I didn't care where I was. You could put me in the back. I don't care. I just was so thrilled to work with Michael. And it was my first big project in Los Angeles. I had to join the union, and I learned a lot. I learned, just watching the filming process, rehearsals. And then when it got to filming, I remember getting nervous, but it was to be expected.
Yeah.
I never saw Michael during rehearsals. I only saw him when we got to on set.
Right.
Wearing full costume and everything. So he had, there was a skeleton crew, probably a smaller group of 10, 12 dancers. I know he had learned some stuff, but he came in full on wardrobe. We're ready to shoot. And I was just like, oh my God, there he is. You're starstruck.
Right off the Thriller as well. He's
yes. Yeah. It was the summer of '85. So yeah, I mean, it was just a learning experience. It was something that I couldn't, I was still in disbelief. I wanted to work super hard and do the best job I possibly can, to keep working. And I was a huge Michael fan. I mean, the cool thing is I saw him 10 months earlier in August, 2 weeks before I moved to LA. I saw the Victory Tour.
Right,
with Michael and his brothers. It was my first time I saw a concert in a stadium. Thousands and thousands.
Yeah.
It was a huge football stadium. And, my senior in high school, he did Thriller and the Thriller album and all the music videos. So, I mean, he was a huge inspiration for me. I loved street dancing at the time and still do, but I was a huge street dancing fan and I was, doing it myself. So Thriller had a little bit in there. Captain EO, there's Poppin' Taco, Poppin'
Yeah.
Pete, Skeeter Rabbit. Like, I'm like, oh my God, these are like the legend street dancers and poppers that I look up to. So that was really cool too.
Yeah. I
We had the
bet.
dancers and then the street dancers that were like top of the top.
Yeah.
You could tell like, oh, that's like an elite, group there that,
Yeah.
obviously Mike was going to do a special thing or something. They have their own little section, and then we had the big group section. So
Yeah.
it was cool though. I mean, there was nothing like it, and I mean, I'm so happy. It sounds silly, but like, all I wanted to do is get a picture with Michael before the job was over. I'm like, when am I going to find this time? Because there's security, and you barely ever see him come on. He just would appear. You're just like, how? Oh, there he is. Like.
Yeah.
But the last day of filming, I remember racing like to the exit before he could exit the soundstage, and he was with George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola, and
Wow.
I'm full costume, makeup, all
Yeah.
that stuff, and it was a wrap. We were done, and I just remember asking him, like, Michael, do you mind if I get a picture? And he was very kind. He was, sure. So I got a picture with Michael, and I also got a picture with George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola.
Nice.
So it was
That's one
crazy, and
heck
I
of
was
a
just like,
souvenir.
yes, I got a picture finally.
I bet.
I cherish
And
it though. It's a great picture,
oh yeah,
cherish it. Great
absolutely.
memories.
And so like at that time you had no idea that you'd go on to a career in choreography. Were you just a dancer at that time?
I knew I wanted to choreograph 100%. So I
Okay.
knew moving to LA, I'm like, I want to work as a dancer, work as much as I can, get a lot of experience, and then eventually I want to choreograph. And I knew that. I always wanted to choreograph because I love freestyling. I love making up my own steps and movement. So
Yeah.
that was something that it was definitely on my radar, and I was
Mm.
striving to do eventually. I just didn't know when or how it was going to happen,
Yeah.
but I always knew I wanted to choreograph for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it
And
happened sooner than I thought. I mean, it happened way sooner than
yeah,
I thought.
literally in '88 then you
Yeah.
won the MTV Video Music Award for Best Choreography for the Pleasure Principle. And
Yes.
so I imagine that's quite a compliment. But I'm wondering what that recognition meant to you at the time and to other choreographers on the scene. Like, is that a ceremony like everybody looks forward to annually? Would it be like a stage and you give a speech, or would there be rivalry? Like, what was that like at the scene on the time?
No rivalry at all. You're just honored to be nominated.
Yeah.
I danced in two of Janet Jackson's videos like a year after Captain EO with
Okay.
Paul Abdul's choreographer, and I was in Nasty Boys and When I Think of You, and Janet was blowing up, and she had this kind of jazz street style kind of mixed,
Yeah.
and I loved Paula's choreography, and I got along with Janet great, and as time went on, I remember Janet called me and said, I'm looking for a new choreographer, and I was wondering if you'd be interested, and I was just like, oh my God, yeah, of course. So I ended up doing her performance on the American Music Awards in '87,
Yeah.
and it was just her and four guys. And I remember I had one of the guys wasn't working out as well. He just wasn't as funky and as street enough. And so I remember I was a 20-year-old choreographer, and hiring my peers and people I look up to. And I remember
Yeah.
I had to let somebody go, and they're like, "Can you just take his place? Because you know everything. You choreographed it." And I was like, "Sure." So that's how I ended
Wow.
up. I danced right off her shoulder on the American Music Awards. It
Hmm.
was just her and four guys. We did Control. And
Yeah.
after that night, her manager, I remember, or record label guy, was like, "You did this tonight. She's going on the Grammys next month. You're doing it. And she's got a new video coming up. You're doing it." I was just
No
like,
way.
"Oh my God, it's happening."
Like it
It's
all hits you at once.
it just
Just
happened.
goes from there.
Yeah. So the next month I did the Grammy Awards performance, and then I did the Pleasure Principle, and of course, nerves is good because, I always get nervous. You don't want to do a great job and impress. And, I knew I was very young for this opportunity. So, but, to be nominated a year later for the MTV Awards was amazing. I also had
Hmm.
a nomination for Sting's video, We'll Be Together. So I had 2 nominations out of 5, and I was just like, this is crazy. I can't.
Wow.
And I was a huge MTV fan. You know, it came out when I was 15. This was only like the 4th year of the MTV Awards because they premiered in '84. Because I remember I just moved to LA and the MTV Awards were on like a month later. So it was thrilling, you know, and I was just, you know, of course you hope maybe you can win, but I was just happy to be nominated. And when they read my name, I was just kind of dumbfounded. I remember walking up and like I remember I was like, I just kept saying, wow, wow, wow. I was like, I didn't know what to say.
No, like, what do you say?
Janet Jackson, the pleasure principal, Barry Lather.
Well, I never given a speech before, but I'm not going to give one. But I'm very excited to be here tonight and accept this. It's the first award I've ever accepted. I don't know what to say. I'd like to thank Janet Jackson for working hard. She worked really hard. I'd like to thank the director, Dominic Senna. I'd like to thank A&M Records. I'd like to thank my mom and dad who are up there in the back. I bought their tickets tonight. I love you guys. Thank you for all your love and support. And I'm nervous, and I'm getting out of here, and thank you very much.
But I did end up, you know, having a little airtime and speech, and you know, I thank my mom and dad I bought their tickets. They set up high in the arena, but I couldn't get any more free tickets. It was just me and a guest. So, but I remember my mom and dad were there, so that was thrilling, and to win that award with them there in LA, and my apartment literally was like 3 miles from the venue. So I'm in my apartment. I'm 20 years old. I'm choreographing, and all of a sudden I just won an MTV award. It was crazy. It was moving fast, and I remember kind of feeling like just stay grounded, stay humble, because you just, you know. But things were moving fast, and I was like, just count your blessings and keep working hard. You know, I was just trying to stay level-headed.
Yeah, like you didn't want it to get to your head.
No. But I knew like. This is going to open, and it did. It opened a lot of doors for choreography. Like working with Janet, after that, I got phone calls and projects, and worked with a lot of different people like Jody Watley, Sheena Easton, Expose. I worked with Sting, a lot of people on A&M Records because that's who Janet was with. Shanice Wilson. I did a couple of, you know, and a lot of dance was huge in music videos then. It was like 87, 88, 89. It was like primo.
The peak.
It was.
Yeah.
It really was. And then a year later, I did Bat Dance video for Prince.
For Prince?
Yes, in 89.
Wow. Okay.
And they had bats, jokers, and Prince was like half bat, half joker with his face painted. And it was for a movie, you know, so it was like, and he wanted something really theatrical and different. So I was like, what do you mean by when you say I want it theatrical? Because like, that can mean anything to anybody. So I wanted to get more specific, you know, but he wanted to be storytelling and different, and not just like that there was a rivalry between the bats and jokers, and he had a split personality, and he was torn, and there was Vicky Vales. So it was a trip. I mean, it was cool.
I bet. Yeah, that must have been a fun one. Let's focus on the pleasure principle for a moment.
Sure.
What inspired that choreography? Because it looks so natural, but so perfect and so masculine and so feminine. It's like the perfect balance. And it was so early in Janet's sort of career. Like she was still, his superstar persona was still being shaped in a way.
It was
quite a big responsibility. And
she
that
was
big
heading like
as
that.
well.
Yeah. I think she kind of had a vibe established because she was like, you know, with Nasty Boys and When I Think of You, and What Have You Done for Me Lately that Paula all did. It was jazz mixed with some street sprinkled in here and there, you know, so it wasn't like regular jazz. It was like a hybrid style. And that's, you know, that was my upbringing, was jazz. And I was obsessed with street dancing, obsessed with it, popping, locking, breaking. I was just like, so that was kind of in my style to incorporate that type of street moves every now and then mixed with jazz. And it was strong and masculine. but I feel like Janet already had established this kind of style and attitude on that album. And Pleasure Principle was like the 5th single off the album. And Paula had done incredible work. And I just remember it was originally, and a lot of people don't know this, originally it was supposed to be Janet with Nasty Girls. Like we had Nasty Boys, but now we had Nasty, they wanted to do Nasty Girls.
So she wasn't going to be on her own.
Yeah, and I remember being in a meeting with John McClane, who was at A&M, and Janet, and everybody had dancers around them. You know, every artist had dancers off their shoulder. And I remember John McClane saying, he goes, you know what? I would love to see Janet dance by herself from the beginning to the end. And almost like prove to everybody, like, I don't need dancers beside me. I can do this myself. He goes, you know, it's almost like she goes into a big warehouse, and this is where she goes to work out and put in the time to perfect her craft. And this is like, you know, and she does it all by herself. And I remember Janet kind of looking like, I don't know, you know,
really?
Like, and I'm like, if it's planned right and shot right, I mean, of course we can do this. You know, it's 4 or 5 minutes. It's just, so that's how it kind of changed. And that video is purposely kind of constructed where she kind of eased into it and then got a little more, you know, until she was working really hard at the end. So, you know, the jacket came off, more moves, more walking around, looking in the mirror.
It just builds
and then she just started dancing and did the chair thing, which she did. A lot of people asked. She did do the flip. She did do the chair thing. There was no dance double. Wow. Janet worked hard and did all that stuff. She worked so hard on that video.
Am I right in saying that you worked on a Pepsi commercial from Michael too, right?
Yes.
What do you recall about that experience? And was that before you worked on Jam?
It was before I worked on Jam. God, I can't remember. I just remember Joe Pitka was a humongous director. Yeah. You know, he did videos, he did commercials, he did film. So I was excited to work with Pitka, and obviously it was a Michael Jackson project. That and you know, it's just kind of like a big high-profile commercial. But the Jam video, I remember, I think the Jam video was after the Pepsi commercial, to be quite honest. And I don't remember, you know, the Pepsi commercial, I don't remember a ton of choreography being done. So, you know, sometimes directors, they're like, we need a choreographer on set. Regardless if we need them or not, I want somebody there. So it's almost like the director's security blanket. Like, I don't want to sit here and have to figure out things, you know, like I want a choreographer here. So
that makes sense. Okay.
That's how that commercial was. And also Jam, the video director, he, you know, there's Heavy D was involved. Chris Cross was involved. You know, Michael, and then Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson were going to be together at some time. And, you know, the director really wanted them to move and dance. But we didn't really rehearse. You know, it's kind of like, I remember I was there ready to help. And they're like, let's just see how they do. We're going to just roll the camera and see how they do. And if we need some guidance and more help, I'll send you in. And it was kind of like they were vibing and just kind of laughing and having a good time. So it wasn't like I gave them specific steps at all. But and I was kind of bummed. I was like, I was ready. And like, there's Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson. This is crazy. Yeah. You know? But we shot that in Chicago, I remember, in another big abandoned warehouse. It was very cool. Just cool to be there, be involved, and see these two superstars work together. One thing I remember about that job is there was a certain area where Michael performed solo. It was in another area. And the stacks of speakers were as tall as a room on both sides. It was like these two huge walls on both sides of Michael of these massive speakers. And it was like it was so loud. And I just remember like, holy crap, like, I can't believe how loud this is. But I remember him saying, like, you have to feel it. You have to feel the beat inside of you. And that's why he had all this massive sound, just like deafening, just got him riled up. It gave him the energy he wanted, and so he could feel the beat and feel the music. And I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it went to the extreme.
Yeah. I think the best experience was, which nobody got to see it because it didn't happen, was those two projects were cool. But in 96, we were doing this HBO special.
Yeah.
And it was like, I forgot what it was, like one night or
one
something.
Night only.
Yes. And it was this massive, and there's all these choreographers were involved. Like there's like a team, like of 6 choreographers. There's Jamie King, there's myself, Travis Lavelle, Debbie Allen. There was a stepping cane type choreographer guy. There's a modern dancer lady. So I was just like, wow, there's a team here. And everybody had a couple numbers, 2 performances. You get 2, you get 2, you get 1. And that was the job where I got to do a new thriller, create a new thriller.
Okay.
And I was supposed to also do Smooth Criminal, which we never ended up doing. But I choreographed a whole new thriller in this futuristic industrial punk vibe. And I came up with the concept and talked with the director, and then we presented it to Michael. Like, it was like the dancers are like black trench coats with these flashlights, high beam flashlights.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like punk, almost like Terminator, but I wanted to like futuristic. In I'll never forget this. I remember talking with Michael, and it was kind of like almost like, this is what I see, and this is what I choreographed. And I worked on it for like 10 to 12 days before Michael even saw it with the dancers. But I remember saying, this, nothing against Thriller whatsoever. It's a masterpiece. You can't touch it. Yeah. But I know the director was seeking for something like new for Thriller. It was 11 years later. What can we do? And it had this edgy rock, punk, industrial, gnarly vibe to it. And
so no zombies?
Huh?
No zombies?
No zombies. No.
Okay.
And he liked the idea, and he embraced it, and all I remember him saying, and I was so nervous and excited. I bet. And all I remember him saying, he goes, "So long as it's better than the original," and I was just like, "Oh my God!" Inside, I was like, "Oh." Nervous,
panic.
But I mean, I've never had 12 days to work on a 4-minute number. Usually you spit it out in 3-4 days, maybe a week. We had so much time, and I choreographed it with him in mind. I was being Michael, and all the staging and choreography that was happening all around him. And I remember he came to rehearsal in New York, and getting back to the Captain EO thing, I said, I was so like my skin was jumping, I was so excited to show him. And I said, here, are you ready? And he's like, yeah. And I said, would you like for me to be in your spot so you could see where you are in the number? I can do your spot. And he goes, that would be great. That I'd love that. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking at the dancers like, here we go. Like, it's a showcase. We're showing Michael what we worked so hard on. And I remember we did it, and I'm channeling Michael's energy and intensity and hitting all the steps and doing all the things.
Yeah.
And and then I went over there and like waiting to see his reaction. I could see him kind of smiling when he was watching it. And I went over there. I'm like, so what you think? And his first words to me was, "You've got soul." He goes, "You've got soul." Like I was like, well, thank you. He saw me move and all the passion I had, and I was just so into it and so excited to show him this new number. But that was such a compliment. He's like, that's the first thing he says. "You got soul."
Nice.
So, yeah. And I said, I go, we showed it him again. I go, "You want to see it again?" He goes, "I'd love to." I showed it again. And then we talked after, and I said, just so you know, I said, we worked together many years ago. I don't know if you remember. I said, but I actually was in Captain EO, and it was my first dance job in LA. And he was like, really? He was like, wow. And that was like 11 years prior.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was cool, that we kind of like reconnected, and it was full circle for me, because now I'm like choreographing for Michael, and he gave me my start in the business,
Yeah.
as a dancer. It was super cool. And I
Yeah.
remember, a couple days went by, and then he's like, Michael wants to come in and start learning this new number. I was like, oh my God, it's happening. It's happening.
Wow. I
So
mean,
it was very cool.
yeah, that's crazy. How did
Yeah.
Michael go about learning it? Would you kind of
That was the
show
other
him
thing
it?
that amazed me about Michael, because even though I work with him, I was teaching him very specific steps and movement and counts, and it was just me and my assistant Ivan, who knew everything that I created, and then and Michael, who was it? That was it. Just me, Michael, and my assistant, and we're in this massive room with mirrors and loud sound, and I started showing him, the choreography and stuff, and he was just watching, and like you could tell he's processing it visually, watching it, and he would move kind of minimal and like hit an angle, hit and I'm like teaching it like I normally do, and I'm like 30 seconds in, taught him a chunk of choreography, and I'm like, I haven't really seen him move like
Yeah.
he's just kind of doing it. I said, you want to put the music on and like let's give it a shot. And I kid you not, this has never happened to me before. I put the music on, and we started dancing, and he just like his intensity went off, and he knew he did all the steps.
Wow.
And I was like, he learned by osmosis. He learned by watching and not physically doing it full out, until I asked him, like, let's do it with music. And then he did it. And that's not normal. Normally dancers, they go through all the movements slowly, and you see them, you correct their arm, or you do this, and you see the person do the movement. He was watching more than moving. But when the song came on and we started going for real, I was just like, he knew it. I was like,
So
oh my
interesting.
God, that is sick. Like, I didn't know anybody that learned like that.
No.
He really did know it. I was like, okay, in my head, I'm like, he knows it. And he was stomping and making sound effects, and he was like just living it. I was like, my God, he's so freaking, he's like intense.
Yeah.
In his face, and his hitting the angles and stomping his feet hard. I was just like, he's doing it for real. like, whoa.
He doesn't play.
No, he does not play. He's such a hard worker, though, But I just thought it was really interesting that how he learned the choreography by watching and osmosis, and I was just like, never have I seen that.
Yeah. Can you describe to me, what did that feel like? You're dancing next to Michael, teaching him your choreography in front of this mirror. You're watching yourself dancing next to Michael Jackson. How does that feel?
It was unbelievable. Like, just my heart is racing. I just remember just wanting to do I just wanted to do a great job. I wanted him to like the choreography, and I just knew it was like, this is a special thing that is happening right now.
Yeah.
And just take it all in, like, just, but I do remember, like, at the end of the day, just our first day rehearsal, and me and my assistant went, we had a beer at a pub, and we're just like, that was insane. We're talking about rehearsal. Like, dude, we danced next to Michael today. That is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember, like I said, he was doing like sound effects when he was learning some of the choreography, like, some of that stuff. And I was like when he did that, I was like, oh my man, he's for real. Yeah. He's going in hard.
Like, ooh.
I know. Me and my friend my sister were just like, that was great. Like, did you hear him? I'm like, yeah, I heard him. But he was doing it like 100% because he had to feel it, the music, the choreography, and just feel it in his body. So it was super cool.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And so you said that the director wanted to kind of rework Thriller. Why do you think they wanted to change things. And did Michael want to change everything too? Before we continue with the interview, let's take a quick break to thank the sponsor of this video, Michael Jackson Market. Michael Jackson Market are a business created by passionate fans who believe that you should have access to the best quality Michael Jackson memorabilia items at a great price. They provide you with the opportunity to get unique Michael Jackson memorabilia items really easily. You can go to their website www.michaeljacksonmarket.com to browse their countless items and even get your hands on one of their Michael Jackson subscription boxes, which are packed with fun items. Each box comes with a custom t-shirt and 7 or 8 other items. So whether it's Michael Jackson Funko Pops, books, cups, chocolate, mini basketballs, gym bags, tote bags, washcloths, stickers, lanyards, pins, t-shirts, or even a keychain of Bubbles the Chimp, don't forget to head to www.michaeljacksonmarket.com and use code REDJACKSON for $10 off all items above $50. Again, that's code REDJACKSON for $10 off all items over $50. Thank you to Michael Jackson Market for sponsoring Red Jackson Dance for 2025.
Yeah, it wasn't really. The main thing was like they just want. It wasn't like, hey, we got to do a new Thriller, but it was like,
yeah,
overall, this special was gonna be super, on another level, and that was the goal, and then Michael has performances that nobody's ever seen before, not just conceptually but also choreographically, and that we're not reinventing Michael. It's just Michael on another level. And so that was there. Where you could feel like everything's got to be fresh, new, hot. There was that sense of drive. And of course, if Michael didn't want to do it, he wouldn't have proved it. He liked the Thriller choreography.
Definitely.
We camera blocked it at the Beacon Theater, and we got close to that show. But it all fell through. Michael got sick and went to the hospital, and it was like the whole show got postponed, and then it never happened. I was like, it was so thrilling to work on it. We were in New York for almost a month, and everybody was working in their like private chambers. Like that group was working on something special. I was working on something special. Jamie King was, everybody was like privately had their own dancers. Everybody had their own dancers. And had their own team. So it was kind of like we didn't get to see what the other people were doing. So it's not like we're working secretively, but there was this cool vibe of, I don't want to say competition, but there was this vibe. Everybody was trying to do something really special and really hot.
You want yours to be the best.
Yeah, so I kind of liked it. It was kind of cool.
Yeah. So you didn't dance in like anybody else's numbers?
No, I was supposed, like I said, I was supposed to do Smooth Criminal and Thriller, and I had an idea for Smooth Criminal had some kind of bungee involved in, a little bit of not acrobatic, but something visually different, and we just never got to it, and it, and the whole project fell through. But the cool thing is, what came out of that is that experience with Michael. And I did rehearse with him, in the studio, and we rehearsed with the dance, and we got to the, to the theater. He liked the number, and but he got sick and it didn't happen. But several months later, I got a call from Travis Payne and Michael, both on the line, and he had a new project coming up, and he wanted me to be involved, and it was Ghost.
Right.
And I, and he liked the steps that he took some of the steps we did in Thriller for the HBO special. Some of those steps appeared over in the Ghost because he knew them already and he liked it.
So that shows a lot that stuck with him and he wanted to reuse it.
Yes.
Right.
And I never knew. Travis told me years later, because Travis was solely working with Michael at that time. It was like 96. 90, no, it was later. 90. Yeah, it was around 96.
Yeah,
he
like
was
96, 97.
Yeah, 96. Yeah. Because Travis, he told me later, he's like, Michael's like, get Lather on the line. Get Lather. Call get Barry on the line. He always said Lather. Get Lather on. Because I say Barry Lather.
Yeah.
But I always thought it was funny. And I never knew that. Like Michael specifically asked Travis, like, get Barry on the line. And what was crazy is that I just signed this big contract for me to direct and choreograph a theme park show that was going into 4 different theme parks. So I wasn't just choreographing, I was directing for the first time, and I helped conceive the whole show.
Yeah.
And I was working the whole month of March. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm not available to do this project. Yeah. And I was freaking out. I'm like, this is a huge opportunity. I have Michael and Travis, and they're like, what's your availability like? And I told them, and Michael understood, it's like you signed, like you have a commitment and you've signed a contract. If I didn't sign a contract, I would have got out. But it was signed, and I already been paid some money up front. Like I was on this project, and I had it was the whole month of March was booked. But I remember, I remember I said, but I would love to work on this somehow, some way, even though I can't be there in person. And I suggested, I said, you know what I could do? I said, I could make up new stuff and record myself and send it to you. And you could use whatever you want to use. I don't care. I just want to be involved.
Right.
And I remember Michael saying, would you really do that? And I said, yeah, I will be in another state. And it's fine. I will make stuff up and send it to you guys, and pick what you want. And hopefully things work out. So I did that for like 5 days. I was in Ohio working at King's. It was this theme park and doing the show that I was supposed to be doing. And I had rehearsals. I'll never forget this. I had rehearsals at like 5 p.m. with the dancers that had night rehearsals. So during the day, I would go in like noon. I had this whole dance studio to myself. I would go in at noon, blast the music, put on sunglasses. I wore a ski hat sometimes, and I just would vibe to music, and I'd make up like 30, 40 seconds of choreography. Brand new, fresh stuff just came out, and I was excited, and I was trying to find new stuff. And I'd record myself, and I'd run to FedEx, send the tape to LA. I did that 5 days in a row. I'm like, Here's another tape. Here's another tape. And I didn't know what they were using or not until I got on to the set. When they were shooting Ghost, by the time they filmed it and all the rehearsals were done, I was back home. And they, Travis, like, you got to come by. We're filming, So I remember being there for Ghost. And I remember asking Travis, I'm like, so did you use any of the stuff I sent? And he's like, dude, like, a ton of it is, yes, we've used a lot of it, and I was like, oh, cool. I didn't know.
Yeah, you just had no idea where you were at.
I didn't know what they might have used or if they rearranged it. And like, I remember like one whole chorus was just straight up my choreography, like that whole chorus. I'm like, yes, you're excited. You get excited, like, oh, those are the steps.
Like, that's mine.
Yes. Yeah. You're like, cool.
Absolutely.
What was weird is that I saw people do choreography and steps that I made up, but like I didn't teach it to them. Travis did, other people taught it to them. So there was a couple things I remember I saw, and Travis gave me a little, it's like, I can give you a little time with them if you want to clean, just, put your input on it. And if there's a couple things you see, and I remember just having a tiny little session, but not a lot, because we're filming. It was no time to change anything. But it was really cool to be involved, to see that all be filmed, out in the airport hangar out in Van Nuys. It was so cool. Stan Winston directed. I'm like, who's Stan Winston? And I realized, like, oh my God, that's doing, like major Jurassic Park. So I was like, oh, okay. This is big
That's
time.
who he is. Yeah.
This is big time.
Big time.
And I remember working with Michael on that job. 2 things that I took away from that job, which was super cool. I was, my wife was, we were expecting our first child, who's now 28. And I had a pager on me, and I never had a pager. because I rented a pager in case my wife went into labor at any second, you know, that I would get notification. And I remember having this pager, and it just felt weird because I wasn't used to having that gadget. And in between takes and just kind of small talk, I remember I was saying something, and then Michael overheard. He goes, you're getting ready to have a baby?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh," he goes, "that's a dream of mine." I remember him saying that.
Wow.
And I had, and like 2 weeks later, you know, our first child was born, and she was 2 weeks late, but like she was due anytime. It was crazy. Yeah. But I just remember him saying, "Oh, that's a dream of mine." And I just thought that was so cool. Like it just seemed so sincere. And he was like happy for me. He goes, you know, like smiling, like, "Wow," you know, I go any day now.
And it's so human as well, because like people see Michael as this huge superstar, but he wanted to do kind of like normal things like that, I guess.
Yeah,
like,
he had a lot of heart, of heart. Yeah,
it's really interesting.
It is cool. I just remember I saw the look in his eyes, and you know, when he said that to me, I'm like, wow, you know, like that really resonated with him. That he's excited.
Totally.
Cool.
Let's hop back to the HBO special for a moment.
Yeah.
So I've heard that there was like a Clockwork Orange inspired performance, like a Frank Sinatra one, and like a bit of Broadway flair. Do you recall any other numbers? Like, it's fascinating to hear like what could have been and like all the different ideas that were there.
Yeah, there's definitely was a Clockwork Orange type number. That's the one that Travis was working on, and the young. This is the first time I met them. You know, Rich and Tone Talawago brothers. Do you know? Yeah, because they were in Ghost, and you know they toured with Michael, and they're doing the MJ musical. You know, working with, you know, training the people getting ready for stage.
Michaels. Yeah.
But that was the first time I met them. They were like young, like probably 17, 19 years old, or you know. And I was like, wow. And they could tap dance and move, and they did street, and they had this different. They just had a different style, and they're like almost like the Nicholas brothers or something. I'm just like, who are these guys? Holy crap! And they were involved in Travis's number. But that was the first time we met, and you know, I ended up working with them later. I brought them in when I worked with Usher later. I have a lot of respect for Rich and Tone and where they came from, their style from the Bay Area. They're the real deal, you know, and they were huge Michael fans as well.
Yeah, love to have them on the channel one day. They're incredible.
But they did that Clockwork Orange number. I did see I peeped a little bit of it. I was like, whoa. You know, they had like just wild wardrobe. They wore like cups. They had hats, suspenders, and it was just like, they're, you know, just they were on a different tip. You know, it's just like, this is super cool. And I remember seeing a little bit of Jamie King's number, "The Way You Make Me Feel," which was very theatrical, and it had like a silhouette female, and then this thing like popped and vanished, and I was actually watching that at camera blocking, because I'm like, I want to see what Jamie did, you know, I want to see what the other people did. I never got to see it. And they were camera blocking that number. It was after we'd already camera blocked Thriller. They were the next people in on stage after me. So I remember kind of staying in the theater, and I just wanted to kind of get a little look at the other number. And that's when Michael, like, he literally collapsed and hit the floor, and paramedics came and they took him off to the hospital. I'm like, I saw it happen. I was like, oh my God. He just
went
face first into the ground. It was unbelievable. And my sister was next to me. We both looked at each other like, did you just, you know, and they're like, back up, you know, and bodyguards are around him and security, and he just fell face first. He wasn't feeling well. I do know that. And he was, you know, he wasn't super strong. You know, he'd already been to the hospital, but he was like, I knew he was feeling under the weather, but he was still trying to be there and do the camera blocking, but with, you know, half his energy. But I was like, once he fell and they took him away, I'm like, man, I don't know if this show's gonna happen.
How soon was that before when it was supposed to be scheduled?
Probably a good 10 days. It was like a week and a half.
Not long at all.
No.
Wow.
No. And we were just starting the camera blocking process at the theater, I don't, they probably been there and set the lights up and everything, but we hadn't been at the theater no more than a couple days.
Wow. Okay.
And there was a lot to camera block. There was, and all these different numbers, and it started to feel, because we had rehearsals for a few weeks, and then I rehearsed with him for a week, and then we missed a week because he wasn't feeling well, and he didn't come to rehearsals. So I was just like, that's when we started getting a little nervous. Like, the rehearsals, he's still not feeling good. It was like, there's still a lot to learn.
Yeah, rehearsing without your principal.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And, he's not going to do anything unless it's perfect. He won't do it. It's like, I do know that about Michael. Everything had to be perfect. And he worked so hard at his craft and respected the process and
like
film.
All or nothing.
Yep. And that's another quote that I do remember him saying, that Ghost, when we're working on Ghost, he goes, this is film. He goes, this lasts forever. Like, this is a film. I was like, I understand. I get it. It's like, this lasts forever. Like, it lasts forever. I was like, okay. That's how he viewed it.
Yeah.
I would just say, it's a film. We're doing a film. This is cool. And he's like, he knew this lasts. So it was very cool.
Yeah. Like, that's the legacy. Like, people will go back to that. And
correct. And I didn't think that way. He did. I didn't.
Did that change the way you thought from then on?
Just knowing how important it meant to him, and that we are shooting a film, and you got to think about it. Each day they're spending thousands and thousands of dollars each day that we're at work. And, you're striving to make a masterpiece, to make this film as brilliant as it can be. And also, perfect all the moves, perfect all the shots, all the choreography, and, and to capture the ultimate vision.
Yeah.
But, I looked at it as like, hey, it's a chance to choreograph and work with Michael, and we're shooting this cool film, But to him, it was like, it lasts forever. What we're doing, it's going to go down. And, he didn't say it's going to go down in history, but he knew films last forever. So people will come back and refer to it and look at it.
You've had such a range of artists you've worked with, like some for the 80s, like Prince, George Michael, and even more contemporary ones like Britney Spears, Justin Bieber, Usher.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a difference in kind of their methodology and sort of how they learn choreography, like the attitude in the way, like over the years?
Yes. I mean, and you don't realize until as time goes by, you realize that the Madonnas, the Janets, the Michael, the Prince, like they had a different work ethic than the generation that came a decade or two later. You still got to work hard. Nothing's going to come easy. If you want to be great, you have to put in the time. I worked with Usher. I directed a couple of his tours and did a lot of TV award show performances with Usher in the 2004 onward. He had the closest work ethic and mentality to Michael than anybody else I work with of that younger generation. Yes.
Yeah.
He realized the intense, doing great choreography, doing branding, hot new steps. Like they got to be new. They got to be innovative. I don't want to copy anybody else out there. Like I want people to look at this stuff and go, oh my God, I want to learn that,
Yeah.
And, he was inspired by Michael. I was inspired by Michael and worked with Michael. So it's cool to see like a whole nother generation. Yeah. Even Bieber, even Justin Timberlake, like all of us have been inspired by Michael. So and we've all looked back on, his videos and masterpieces that he's done. And, he really did set the tone. I mean, he was the first black artist played on MTV.
Yeah.
And he made many films. His music videos were like mini movies and specials. So that's why, his genius, and had the vision and wanting to do something special for every song. I do think the younger generation, they understand that though. Like
Yeah.
the video is a vehicle for you to do something visually that's artful, choreographically or conceptually, and you could take your song and just bring it to a whole nother level. Is
Yeah.
how you present it.
Well, Barry, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
Yes,
Do you
it
have
was a
any
pleasure.
future Do you have any future ambitions or any social media where people can follow you? What's coming up next?
Right now, I'm waiting to hear on a couple things, but like there's no definitive project. You know, our business is weird. You can be really busy for 6 to 8 months, and all of a sudden it can be slow for 2 months,
Yeah.
and then busy for 2 months, and then slow for a month. So it's really up and down, up and down, up and
Yeah.
down, and it's always been that way. It's that way as a dancer. It's that way as a choreographer, and it's that way as a director. Um, you know, so I have an Instagram, you know, I'm not on it all the time. You know, I do have social media. I just don't heavily
Yeah.
plug all the time, you know. And some people are
Fair
really good
enough.
at it. You know, I have it, but
Fair
it's all
enough.
good. It's part of it's part of everyday life now, as we know.
Fair enough. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been incredible hearing your memories, and hope you enjoy the rest of your week. I'll keep in touch.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for letting me share the special moments I had, you know, with Michael. And his legacy lives on for sure and continues to inspire so many of us. So it's a pleasure.
Absolutely does.
Have a great day.
You too.